Ever since Nintendo dropped Super Mario Maker in 2015, a game that allowed you to create your own 2D Mario levels on the basis of the existing titles, the obvious question on everybody's mind is, hey, why don't they do the same exact thing, but for 3D Mario instead? Unfortunately, Nintendo still has yet to make any such utility, which still bums me out. In general, if you want to make your own 3D Mario levels, you have to know how to make ROM hacks, which is a very involved and often tricky process, especially for people with limited experience writing code or modeling levels or, just about anything that goes into a video game. I often wonder how many great creations never see the light of day because the process is just too involved for a lot of people. But over the years, the communities have made great strides in the direction of making these processes more efficient and straightforward. Utilities and standards, do's and don'ts, optimizations and bug fixes, all of this stuff is becoming far more refined all the time. But there's still a floor, a lower limit to just how simple the process can ever really become. Making ROM hacks will always be at least somewhat challenging, and for a lot of people, even those with creative ambitions, the process may unfortunately shake their resolve and put them off. I know this because I've tried to do it in the past and got really impatient and just said, nah. Mario Builder 64 is something that I have been itching for years. This is very much the dream come true for every single person who has wanted to try messing around and making their own Mario 64 level. If, like me, you've always wanted to make Mario 64 levels but kept hitting a wall with the ROM hacking process, here you go. This is a super easy to use tool that allows you to make your own Super Mario 64 levels. This was made primarily by Rovert and Arthur Lilly. You probably remember Rovert as the creator of Beyond the Cursed Mirror, which is one of the best Super Mario 64 ROM hacks out there. It's a ROM hack with a ton of original content, custom coding, custom items, enemies, and biomes. And this is important because a lot of the custom assets and tools that make that game so great are actually available for players of this builder to use. This would already have been great if it was just vanilla Mario 64 components, but no. We got all this bonus stuff on top of that, and that dramatically expands the scope of what you can do. If you really know what you're doing, you can make levels that could be mistaken for something made by a ROM hacking veteran. As I said, 3D Mario Maker seems like such an obvious concept, but one of the most popular theories as to why Nintendo hasn't done a 3D Mario Maker themselves as of yet is the fact that it would be way too complicated to figure out, which is not an unreasonable speculation on paper. 3D introduces a lot more variables that you would rarely, if ever, have to consider in 2D. But if you're worried that Mario Builder 64 is gonna be too complicated, worry no longer. The level builder is super easy to use. You choose how big you want the level boundaries to be, you select a theme which can later be changed, and then you start navigating the 3D space cube by cube. You select some level geometry, item or enemy to place there, and it's that simple. It couldn't be easier. You can even place slopes, which is kind of a big deal because even the original Mario Maker couldn't figure that out. The real Mario Maker is famously intuitive, and this game translates that template so effortlessly into 3D. Everything about the builder feels surprisingly professional. You have this super clean and animated HUD. It communicates very clearly how to use every tool, and the controls are very intuitive once you get used to them. There is so much cool stuff you can experiment with, and I had a lot of fun just pushing the builder to its limit and seeing what kind of dumb shit you can get away with. You can even place NPCs with a selection of pre-made dialogue. To my knowledge, there's no way to write fully custom messages because people would probably write horrible things like The Witcher 3 is better than Bloodborne, but it's still pretty funny, especially with Dark Souls style messages like this. One of the coolest things about this hack is that you can choose the level music and the boss music from a very long list, including songs from the base game, but also a huge variety of remixed tunes. The music is like one giant greatest hits album featuring remixes from so many other ROM hackers that you'll likely have heard before if you've been playing ROM hacks as long as me. Obviously, you don't get the depth or level of customization with this builder that you would get if you were to make an actual ROM hack yourself, but just by having all that stuff at your disposal, it already makes it far more powerful than you would expect. Of course, there is a limit to the physical size of the level because the Nintendo 64 is 300 years old, but it's a lot bigger than I expected it to be. At the end of the day, with all the options that you have and the extremely intuitive nature of those options, the greatest bottleneck is your own imagination. Personally, I'm really proud of my Shadow Moses level. In an attempt to recreate the opening sequence from Metal Gear Solid 1, we have the intro where you swim up to the facility, you sneak through this thing, the robot spiders represent the guards, and the eyeball dudes represent the surveillance cameras, and you even get to fight Liquid Mario at the end.
Snake, you know who that is?
You're kidding, right? It's Mario.
And that's another thing that makes it so exciting. The best thing about this ROM hack is that you can actually share your levels with other players online, as well as downloading their levels and loading them up in your own game, almost like the original Mario Maker. The process is obviously a little bit more involved, although there's none of that Nintendo code bullshit, and it's still pretty crazy any way you slice it. This is a legitimate thing. Because the builder is so intuitive and anybody can use it, I'm actually very excited to see what people do with it. I've already played a handful of custom levels myself, and I'm quite impressed by the creativity and novel use of resources on display. And just the very fact that something this new already has a not insignificant number of levels published is pretty conclusive proof of just how great this thing is. It just immediately popped off. This is the first version of the game, so obviously there are still some kinks to work out. I had a recurrent crash where attempting to change the biome late in development of one of my levels threw up this spooky ass error screen, and while I was building Shadow Moses I encountered a strange bug where I reached the max vertex limit, and even after deleting a bunch of stuff, the game still somehow believed I was at the max, but it's a pretty stable thing overall, and to be fair, I was really pushing my luck. It's also worth noting that the recommended emulator setup apparently behaves in a way that makes some antivirus softwares go cyber psycho, which obviously affected me. I want to make it clear that I cannot advise anybody on computer security or safety, though I will say that the research I did suggested that these were false positives, but I encourage you to do your own research and ask somebody more knowledgeable than me. But even with these bumps in the road, if you were to ask me what I would want out of a 3D Mario Maker type game, Mario Builder 64 is just about everything that I would have asked for. Much like the game that inspired it, it's super powerful and very intuitive. It's something with a lot of potential and something that I can definitely see people coming back to. It's early enough that we haven't even begun to see how people are going to be using it, but goddamn, I can't wait to see it. Thanks for watching, y'all.